So let me just give you an overview. Let's start with an example. Let's say you have a data frame and it's in a so-called wide format, an untidy format. Here you have these different values, but you have these three variables. And let's just assume for the time being that these different names of your columns, A, B, and C, let's say that those are categorical values of what should be one single variable. So ultimately, we need to reshape this data from this so-called wide format to a long format. That's really what melt does. Melt reshapes the data from wide format to long format. So let's say that our data frame is called df_wide. We can use melt to reshape this data. So these three different variable names, A, B, and C, in the output, these are being treated as categories under one single variable. And the original values underneath those columns are now values in a new value variable. So what we're doing here is we are using the melt method to rearrange our data into a new format. And ultimately, this output format, this is what we would consider to be a tidy format. Tidy data is typically required when we're using most of the methods from Pandas, and it's also required for many other things like Seaborn. So Seaborn and Pandas and many of the data analysis techniques that we're going to need to use, they typically assume this sort of format. So if your data is not in this format, if it's in a so-called wide format or something else, you need to use a tool like Melt to try to rearrange the information into the proper form.